योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रबलं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं देवं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम. So in the previous session we looked at Sutra 3.13, which was etena bhutendriyeshu dharmalakshanaavastha parinama vyakhyataah, and then it had a long bhashya where we understood what is dharma lakshana avastha parinamaha. Now as part of that, Vyasa did explain to us the dharma dharmi bhava, what is the dharma and what is the dharmi. Now in the today's sutra 3.14, Patanjali as part of the sutra brings up the aspect of dharmi and clearly pins down, defines what is the dharmi, so that in the sutra sequence also the dharmi is clearly identified and clearly defined. So the sutra 3.14 says tatra, says Vyasa. So tatra means in the context of the dharma lakshana avastha parinama that we have seen, which can be applied to bhutas and indriyas and therefore to the entire creation. Tatra, in this context, comes the Sutra 3.14. So the Sutra 3.14 says, śāntoditāvyapadeśyadharmānupātī dharmī. So Shanta, Udita, Avyapadeshya, Dharma Anupati, Dharmi. So who is this Dharmi? What is this Dharmi? This Sutra defines that. He says, Shanta Udita Avyapadeshya Dharmaha. So there are these dharmas that are Shanta, Udita and Avyapadeshya, which in some sense Shanta refers to Atita. So dharma that has been active and now is become quiet in the sense that it is a thing of the past. Udita, which means it has emerged and is currently active. It currently has vyapara. Avyapadeshya is, there is no vyapadesha at this point. It is unmanifested, it is not yet come, it is anagata. So the dharmas are Shanta, Udita, Avyapadeshya. Now, with respect to the dharmas, who is the anupatin? The one that is the anupatin, that is the dharmi. He says. So, anupatin means one who subsists through them, who has the continuity through them. So, the Shanta dharmaha, Udita dharmaha and Avyapadeshya dharmaha, tan anupatitum, anugantum, shilam asya iti śāntodita avyapadeshya dharmānupātī. Now this is the dharmi. Means the one whose nature is to be part of it throughout, to subsist throughout, to be the underlying substrate throughout. The thing that has that nature, Shīlamasya, means one who that has that nature in that context is the dharmi. So therefore, Patanjali gives a very precise definition. He says that dharmas are of all these kinds, past, present and yet to come. And in all of this, there is something that subsists through it. That thing that subsists through it is the dharmi. And thereby with this sutra, the Yoga Darshana declares that it clearly recognizes the dharmi dharma bhava, and it defines, this sutra defines what is the dharmi.
So the paranamas have been explained. called dharma parinama, lakshya parinama, avastha parinama. So these changes take place in a substrate, underlying principles on which all these various kinds of changes take place. What is that underlying principle which is constant? So that is called substrate, and the characteristics always have some substrate. And there are characteristics to something. These are the characteristics of this. That this is underlying principle there, and it has the dharma lakshana avastha parinama as described in the previous sutra. So therefore Vyasa says śāntoditāvyapadeśyadharmānupātī. Shanta means having gone to latency. Udita means actualized. And avyapadesha means potentially, yet to come. It will take some time to appear. So not yet appeared, already appeared and gone to latency. So these are the three advas as we had discussed earlier in the previous sutra. So that which is underlying substrate, dharmānupātī, that is dharmī, that is characterized. So characterized is being precisely described here, defined here in barest of few words. So having explained dharma, now dharmi is being explained, and therefore Patanjali commences with definition. Okay.
So now that dharmi has been defined, let's see what Vyasa has to say in his Bhashya. So Vyasa begins by saying, Yogyatavachinna dharminaha shaktireva dharmaha. So what is the dharma after all? Dharma after all is the dharmi is yogyatavachinna shaktihi. It is that shakti that brings its suitability, fitness, capacity, yogyata for any karyam or anything. That is after all a dharma, that is a characteristic. Now the shakti is a broader concept. Elsewhere in some text, I don't remember the exact line, but essentially it says, Sarva hetushu hetutvam nirvodhi shakti. So, whatever the cause, so that's a beautiful definition. It says, whatever the cause, whatever the hetu, sarva hetushu hetutvam, what brings in the hetutvam, what makes it the cause, that thing is the shakti. Hetutvam nirvodhi shakti. So here, so when we say shakti, because it can be of several types, there is something called avachinna. Avachinna means aspected. We are taking one aspect of it. Which aspect? Yogyatavachinna. So the yogyata for anything, for vyapara. So for example, if the dharma is a potness, okay, the ghatatvam, or if it is a certain characteristic like the red color, or the gold is now an ornament, so it is the it being an ornament, etc. So the yogyata, that aspect of it that brings up that shakti aspected in that manner, that is after all the dharma, that is after all the characteristics, says Vyasa. Such as, so that phala prasava bhedanumita sadbhavaha ekasya anyonyascha paridrishtaha. So that is from it is of nana rupa. Phala prasava bheda means because it is of nana rupatvam. Prasava means utpatti, coming up. Now phala prasava bheda means it is of various rupas. So from that it is anumita. So it is not necessarily seen, but it is inferred. Anumana pramana labhyaha means anumitaha. So this is obtained by anumana pramana, by inference and reasoning, he says. So phala prasava bheda anumita sadbhavaha. So it's existence. Sadbhava means existence. So because the karyas, the emergence of karya from it, it is of various types. There are differences. Therefore, one says that there are different ekasya of the same entity. There are anyanya, so multiple, bahusankhyaka, so multiple dharmis, the dharmas it is seen. So for the same dharmi, one can infer because of the phala prasava veda, because there are various things that come up, various things that emerge. One can infer that there are several dharmas for the same dharmi, he says. So essentially, what Vyasa is trying to say is, the dharma can be several, but the dharmi, among the several dharmas, that dharmi is only one, and that is being inferred from the karya bheda of that entity having several, the karya bheda arising from several dharmas. Because after all, the dharma is the yogyata rupini shakti. The dharma is that which can create those various forms and various karyas out of that same entity. So that yogyata is existing as a dharma, and underlying that there is a dharmi, and it is seen, and therefore it can be so inferred, he says. Now, Vyasa is going to tell us about the Shanta Udita and Avyapadeshya. So he says, Tatra Vartamanaha Svavyaparam Anubhavan Dharmaha Dharmantarebhyaha Shantebhyascha Avyapadeshebhyascha Vidyate. So, he says that the Vartamana, which means the currently present and active dharma, what is its characteristic? That dharma, it is Svavyapara Anubhavan. It is experiencing its own activity. So it is currently active, and therefore it is different from the Shanta dharmas and the Avyapadeshya dharmas, because they are not experiencing those activities. So essentially, he is saying that what is this Udita dharma and how is it different from Shanta dharma? The Udita dharma is which is in the present and currently active. Then yada tu samanyena samanvagato bhavati tada dharmi swarupa matratvat ko asau kena vidyate. So he says now it is active, and therefore it differs from the other dharmas which are Shanta or Avyapadeshya. However, when the same dharma is samanyena samanvagato, means it is not currently active, it's in common general state, then it is dharmi swarupa matra. It is not active, so that it is just part of the dharmi swarupa, and it has nothing else. Then ko asau kena vidyate, and who is the dharma and what is it differing from? Essentially, it is not differing from other dharmas. So when the dharma is in its active state, so for example, we had seen for a mrit, that is the clay, there was a ghatatvam, ghatakara dharma, so it has become a pot. So when it is in that state, that ghatatvam as a dharma differs from the Shanta state of the mritpinda, which is a lump of clay, and Avyapadeshya state of whatever other things can happen, could happen, will happen, etc. But however, when it is not in that state of the pot, then the ghatatva dharma is just part of the dharmi swarupa. It is just subsiding in the clay, and it is not currently active. In that case, that ghatatva dharma, there is nothing to say that it differs from some other Shanta dharma or Avyapadeshya dharma, because it itself is not vyapara yukta. And that is what Vyasa is trying to say, that when something is presently active, that dharma is manifested, and swa vyaparam anubhavan, it is experiencing its own activity, then it differs from the Shanta and Avyapadeshya. But otherwise, who is to say what it differs from? Because it is dharmi swarupa matra only. So then he says, Tatra trayak khalo dharminaha dharmaha shanta udita avyapadeshascheti. So then he consolidates this. Say, okay, so there are finally the three categories for the dharmas. There is the Shanta, there is the Udita, and there is the Avyapadeshya. So then what are these? Will be the natural question in our minds. So Vyasa says, Tatra Shantaha ye krutva vyaparanuparatāha. So the Shanta dharmas are those that have done their thing, which means they have been manifested. So they have done their thing and then Kritva Vyaparan Uparataha. After that, they have gone away, they have ceased doing their thing, they have become quiet, or in some sense, they have faded away. Those are the Shanta dharmas. Because they had their chance, they have been in the present, they have done their Vyapara, their activity, and then they are Uparataha. So they have sort of faded away, become quiet, become silenced. So those have gone away, they are the Shanta dharma. So it is also interesting to see that while we are studying this, Patanjali has specifically chosen to use the word Shanta Udita and Avyapadeshya rather than Atita Vartamana and Anagata. And Vyasa is then saying they are Shanta because they have been active, manifested, etc. Then they have obtained the Uparama. Uparama means Shanti. They have sort of faded away, been silent. So they are Shantaha. Okay. So what are the next? Uditaha. Svavyaparaha. Savyaparaha Uditaha. So Savyapara means Vyaparena Saha. Those that have a Vyapara going on. Those who are active. Those that are doing things. That dharma that is currently in its active state doing its thing. Savyapara. These dharmas are known as Uditaha. Udita means those that have arisen. Those that have emerged. So Shanta has been explained. Udita has been explained. And Techa, now about the Udita, Techa Anagatasya Lakshanasya Samanantaraha. So these are immediately after the Anagata Lakshana. So this is also interesting in the sense that, there is no gap. So a dharma has a mark of being Anagata. Anagata means not yet happened. And then not yet come. Then let's say it happens. That dharma manifests itself. It comes to the adva of the present. It becomes part of the vartamana. And therefore, this vartamana lakshana or the state of udita is samanantara, means it happens without any gap with respect to the anagata lakshana. So like it was explained, I think in the last session or session before that, normally we are used to say first the past came and happened, then the present happened, and then the future is yet to happen. So that is the sequence in which we would refer to them. But here it is a reverse sequence. Just all the dharmas, they have a anagata lakshana. They are all existing. So first they have the anagata lakshana. Then some of them may get the vartamana lakshana because they become the thing of the present. And after that they get the atita lakshana. So the lakshana, if you think of it in the terms of the lakshana, the chronology is reversed. The anagata, the future state, happens first. Then the vartamana state happens. Then the atita happens. So here, techa anagatasya lakshanasya samanantaraha. So without a gap, after anagata comes the vartamana. Vartamanasya anantaraha atitaha. So after the vartamana, they get the mark of being the atita. Because after being the thing of the present, they will become the thing of the past. So then another Vyasa raises a question, a doubt that will occur to the sort of the keen reader and answers it. He says, Kimartham atitasya anantara na bhavanti vartamanaha. So why not following the dharma that has the mark of the atita, that is the thing of the past, why doesn't the vartamana come? So this is again Vyasa is bringing up the point of what was referred earlier as Sankaryam, Adva Sankaryam, where there is a confusion about this past, present, future, and why not anything can happen at any time. So why not something that has the mark of Atita as something that has already happened? After that immediately, why doesn't it get the mark of being Vartamana? Why doesn't it become the thing of the present? Then it says, Purva Paschimataaya Abhavat. So he introduces a thing called, there is a Purva Paschimata. There is a thing of this happens first. Purvam means earlier. Paschima means later. So there is a certain or you can also, Purva Paschima is also used for east and west. Okay, so in general, there is a certain relationship of Purva and Paschima, which imposes the sequence. And there is a Purva Paschima Bhava between the Vartamana and Atita. And therefore, after Atita, you won't get Vartamana, says Vyasa. So essentially, he is laying out the Siddhanta by pinning down all the details so that there is no loophole in the explanation. Then says Vyasa, Yatha Anagata Vartamanayoho Purva Paschimata Naivam Atitasya. So he says, yes, with respect to Anagata and Vartamana, there is a Purva Paschimata. But for Atita, there is no Purva Paschimata with respect to anything else. It is not Purva with respect to anything else. Once it is Atita, there is nothing, no other mark that is going to come. Tasmat na Atitasya asti samanantaraha. So therefore, for Atita, there is no subsequent immediately following state. Once it is Atita, once it is Shanta, it is done. It becomes Shanta. Tad anagata eva samanantaro bhavati vartamanasya. Therefore, the anagata itself immediately becomes vartamana. Something that is yet to come will become something that has come. So Vyasa has given a certain explanation of, firstly, what is dharma, what is dharmi, by saying yogyata avachinna dharminaha shaktireva dharmaha. And we discussed a little bit about what Shakti is. Then why there are how it is inferred from the fact that there are several types of dharmas, and then for a same dharmi, and therefore there is this dharmi. And then he explains Shanta Udita in some detail. Next he is going to talk about Avyapadeshya, because Avyapadeshya in some sense has a slight difference in its nature compared to the Vartamana and Atita, and that we'll be seeing next.
So Vyasa is explaining the Shanta Udita Avyapadeshya aspects of the advas which are mentioned in this sutra. So the dharma will have these three phases or states. Like we see that something comes from something as an effect, and there is a cause behind it. And then we see that there is always a process of change taking place, such as from earth particles you get lump of clay, from lump of clay you get a raw pot, and from raw pot you get a baked pot, and so that's how things, they come out from something which is at the cause. And therefore there are Shanta Udita Avyapadeshya phases. So he's explaining all these phases, what is Shanta, what is Udita, and what is Avyapadeshya. As you have just now heard that when the pot is at hand, what has gone to latency? The rawness has gone to latency. The clay condition has gone to latency. And something going to latency, something can come out. The next effect can come out. So actual state will come out with something gone to latency. And that is called, what goes to latency is called Shanta Dharma. That means it is gone. It is gone to latency. So in the example that we saw just now, the pot that we buy in the shop, in a market, that is a pot which can contain water, which can contain things. It becomes functional. But before the potness came, there were other phases which have now gone to latency, and because they have gone to latency, the potness has come. Earthness goes, clayness comes. Clayness goes, the raw potness comes. Raw potness goes, and baked potness comes. So something has to go to latency, otherwise you won't get the effects or the chain of effects. So that's the shanta, means all that has gone to latency. That is shanta. So by that process, something going to latency, something will come up. And then that will be actualize the state of pot. And then the pot can have its functions. It becomes functional. You can carry water, you can carry things, you can transport things with the help of pot. You can fill something in the pot and carry that from one place to another place, one location to other location. So it starts becoming functional. So udita state means when it is having its function. We don't see the functionality in clay, and we don't see functionality in raw pot. But when the pot is baked, we can carry water in it, etc., and other things, etc. So that is the udita state. Udita state means its vyavahara, its vyapara is actualized and it can carry out that. And then the avyapadesha is the third phase, which is yet to happen. So what is going to yet to happen for a pot which is already in use, which is actual for a pot, functional pot? Something is yet to happen to it. That is, at some point in time, the pot will break. And then you will have the chips. So that is yet to come. So, how the potness has come, its journey has come in from earth, then a lump of clay, and then raw pot, and then baked pot. So that's how it has come to present state where it is functional. But then the pot is not going to remain eternally as a pot. So at some point in time, the potness will go and the chipness will come. So that is yet to come. So that is avyapadesha. So that's how Vyasa is explaining what are the shanta, udita, avyapadesha dharmas, which you just now heard, which Vyasa explained, and Srineet related those to you. So dharmas have been mentioned. Now all in dharmas there is something constant. That is what we call as material cause of it. Whether it is raw pot or baked pot or broken pot, the earthness doesn't leave it. That is dharmī. So that is what the sutra is trying to mention as to what is that which is sarva dharmānupātī. It is going, whatever dharma, whether atita dharma, vartamana dharma, anagata dharma, or as you heard, the order actually is from anagata to vartamana to atita, and not as we empirically, temporally feel that the past is first, then the present, and then the future. That is not the sequence here. The avyapadesha is first. From potential state we get actual state, or from actual state we get latent state. Not from latent state we get actual state, and actual state to potential state. So the metaphysics is mentioning that clearly, which goes against our usual experience that we think past is first and the past is gone, therefore it is first, and then the present, and then the future. We think people put the future at the third place, whereas the future is in the first place because potentiality is there in the future, in the avyapadesha dharma. So that is also important information which we get from the science of Patanjali Yoga. And so that is important input for our thought process. Rather than the habitual process of past, present, future, we are told it is future, present, past. So anyway, these three dharmas have been mentioned. And then samanantaraha, that means there is that sequential order which is to be found from Avyapadesya to Vartamana and Vartamana to Anagata. So the things are flowing in time and they are flowing in changes also. And we have seen all those changes in Lakshana Parinam, oldness to newness. The newness is coming up, oldness is going away. So in any material matter, there is always the change taking place. Although we think that the things are not changing, like a metal, we think the metal is metal all along, but it is going from newness to oldness, like a cloth, newness to oldness. So that Lakshana Parinama is there, Avastha Parinama is there, and Dharma Parinama is there, which we have seen earlier. But what is in it as a substrate is dharmī. And basically now Shanta, Avyapadesya, and Udita and Avyapadesya have been beautifully described and defined by Vyasa in very technical and forensic language. Okay.
So the term Avyapadesya, just to talk about it a little bit. Vyapadesya means, Avyapadesya means something that cannot be designated, something that cannot be named, something that you cannot do vyavahara with respect to it. Basically, that dharma has not yet emerged. So you cannot mark it, you cannot designate it, you cannot name it, etc. So the vyavahara with it is not possible, so it is Avyapadesya. So Shanta, Udita and Avyapadesya. Now, Vyasa continues to talk about this Avyapadesya, the dharmas that are not yet manifested, that are not Vartamana. So what about them? He says, Avyapadesyaha ke. So what are these Avyapadesya? So here, the thing is, with respect to Vartamana, something that is active, you can say the Vyapara is happening. Vyaparam anubhavan. So kriyamanam. So something that is happening. With respect to Atita, you can say Kritam, something that has happened. Anubhutam, what has been experienced has happened. That dharma has happened and gone away. But then for Anagata or Avyapadesya, can you say that Vyaparam karishyanti, something that they will do? Okay. So that is not the case. And that is what is being discussed. Why is that not the case? Because Sarvam Sarvatmakamiti. So there are several dharmas that are not yet in their present state. And who is to say whether they will be or they will not be? And therefore the Avyapadesya is a very broad space where many things can potentially happen. Okay, so we cannot say karishyanti, just like has been, is and will be. So here we cannot say will be, because the scope of the Avyapadesya dharmas is more than what is the part of will be. Because some of them may not be will be, but they are still dharmas in the potential state, in the Avyapadesya state. And to explain that, Vyasa is saying, Sarvam Sarvatmakam. Everything is Sarvatmakam. Anything can become anything, he says. And this can go into a sort of a long discussion, because even in Vedanta there is this discussion of Panchikaranam, where the elements of Prithvi, Ap, Tej, Vayu, Akasha, they mix together. So the earth, water, fire, air. So in the Vyashti Srishti, in the creation, there is nothing that is purely Prithvi, purely Ap, purely Agni, etc. Because there is a Panchikaranam, everything is mixed. And because everything has everything, and everything can turn into everything, anything can turn into anything. So Sarvam Sarvatmakam. Because everything has that underlying Shakti which we talked about. Yogyatavachinna dharminaha Shakti. So that discussion is happening. So Vyasa says Sarvam Sarvatmakam. Yatroktam Jalabhumyoho Parinamikam Rasadi Vaishwarupyam Sthavareshu Drishtam Tatha Stavaranam Jangameshu Jangamanam Sthavareshu iti. So considering the Jala and the Bhumi, so here it is Jala is the water element, the Ap element, and the Bhumi, the Prithvi element. Parinamikam, through their transformations. Rasadi Vaishwarupam, So there is several things, rasa, etc., Vaishwarupyam of all various types. We can see drishtam, sthavareshu drishtam. So sthavara is those part of the non-moving creation. So usually plants, for example, or other things. So they are all made up of rasa and the water element and the prithvi element. Then sthavaranam jangameshu. So after all the charachara, the moving animals, etc., they consume plants. So the material of the plant is turning into the material of the moving animals. Jangamanam sthavareshu. The material of the animals then again goes as food for the plants. So all of this, there is this transformation happening. So if you consider the Jala Bhumi, says Vyasa, the Jala and the Bhumi, there is a parinamikam through all these transformations. Rasadi Vaishwarupyam, all the various aspects, that is known as Vaishwarupyam. Essentially the everythingness. Sthavareshu drishtam, we have seen in the Sthavara, we have seen in the Jangama. So Sthavareshu drishtam, tata Sthavaranam Jangameshu. So whether you see plants or animals or any such thing, you can find that the plant material turns into animal material by the animal consuming it. Animal material can be part of the fodder, the manure, the fertilizer of the plant and becomes the plant material. And so on, it keeps on happening. And therefore, sarvam sarvatmakam, says Vyasa. And evam jatyanuchedena sarvam sarvatmakamiti. He says, jatyanuchedena means jatehe anuchedaha. So of the jati means the let's say the category. So ghatatvam is a jati. So the common thing among various individual representatives. So for example, for all the cows, gauhu, there is a jati called gotvam. There is a cowness which is underlying it. So that is the jati. So now the jati has a anucheda. So there is no ucheda. It can never be cut off and thrown away. The jati, there is a anucheda of it. It lasts. It has a persistence. So and because of that, evam means similarly jatu anuchedena sarvam sarvatmakam. Everything from a Shakti point of view, from a potential point of view, everything can become anything. So sarvam sarvatmakam iti. Then desha kala akara nimitta sambandhat nakhalu samana kalam atmanam abhivyaktiriti. Now he is saying, so suppose someone says, okay, Vyasa, you are saying sarvam sarvatmakam, then why doesn't anything turn into anything at any time, arbitrarily? Then he says, desha, kala, akara, nimitta, asambandhat. So, whatever the time aspect, the region, the space aspect, the karana, the nimitta, the manifesting cause aspect, akara, the form or the underlying jati. So all of them have to come together for it to manifest. But if it is not there, asambandhat, because all of them have not come together, therefore nakhalu samana kalam, at the same time, atmanam abhivyaktiriti. At the same time, a thing doesn't turn into everything else. Okay, so for example, a lump of clay, at the same time it doesn't become water and gold and a cat and a dog, etc. Everything. Why? Because the desha kala akara nimitta sambandha is not there. For only one of the things it is there. So therefore, a certain parinama happens, which is anugunam, as what will follow based on the desha kala nimitta that exists. One of those things will manifest. Okay. Yaha eteshu abhivyakta anabhivyakteshu dharmeshu anupātī samanya visheshatma so anvayi dharmī. So then, having taken us through this thought process, where it says avyapadeshya is special, we don't say for atita we can say anubhutam or kritam. For vartamana we can say kriyamanam or anubhavan. But for avyapadeshya we don't say karishyati, there's something that will be. or anubhavishyati, etc. But we say avyapadesha is, it can be anything, so sarvam sarvatmakam. And what will really manifest depends on several things like desha, kala, akara, nimitta. But whatever may be the case, he says, yaha, the one, eteshu abhivyakta anabhivyakteshu. In all of these, manifested or unmanifested, in all of these dharmas, abhivyakta anabhivyakteshu dharmeshu anupātī, one who lives through it, one who subsists through it, that thing that exists. Samanya Vishesha Atma. So one who is of the nature of Samanya and Vishesha. Samanya Vishesha means one that has manifested, unmanifested, etc. Specific characteristics or in the general Swarupa Matra state. That Anvayi, which persists through, that Anvayi is the dharmī, he says. So, this is, at this point, Vyasa finishes the explanation of the Avyapadesya and then brings back this concept of, now that we have seen Shanta, Udita and Avyapadesya, in all of these, we can say that there exists this dharmī who subsists through all of this, and there are these several dharmas which can either be Shanta, Udita or Avyapadesya. Now Vyasa is going to counter some of the objections of the time. Most of these objections are with respect to the Bauddha Matam, or what is known as the Saugata Matam. So that is from the... Now when we say the Bauddha Matam, we say the Buddhist opinion. But the Buddhist opinion, one thing we have to keep in mind, is not necessarily Buddha's opinion. Because a lot of the original Buddha's teaching don't touch too much on the theoretical aspects. So afterwards, there are multiple schools. There are 4 famous schools. And each of them, they also differ from each other. Okay, so Bauddha Matam is a very generic term, but it refers to the literature of the various schools, of the Buddhist schools. But here, there is a specific objection that Vyasa is dealing with. He says, Yasya tu dharma matram eva idam niranmayam tasya bhoga bhava. So, Yasya, for those people, for that person, who says that dharma matram eva idam. So there is a opinion or a school that says everything is dharma only, because what can you see, what can you infer? You can see hotness, color, the coldness, you can see, so all of these are dharmas. This is, where is the dharmi underlying it? I don't see it. So how do you say it is there? That is nonsense. There is no dharmi. So that is also a strong matam with a lot of thought behind it. So Vyasa says, if somebody says there is dharma matram eva idam niranvayam, there is nothing that subsists through it. So everything is dharma and everything is momentary. There is nothing subsisting behind it. Now what is the problem? He says, tasya bhoga bhavaha. He says there is a problem of the bhoga. So there is an underlying principle, which is often referred to as a karma principle, that is accepted by all schools, even the schools with this Bauddha Matam. He says, if there is some act is done, its fruit needs to be experienced. Okay? But he says, Vyasa is saying, if the opinion is dharma matram, niranvayam, then this bhoga cannot be explained. Why? Kasmat anyena vijnanena kritasya karmanaha anyat katam bhoktritvena adhikriyate. So if everything is momentary, if nothing persists through, then the thing that did the act, anyena vijnanena. So vijnana term is very interesting that is used here, because it is used a lot in the Bauddha Matam also, and it is also used in the Vedas. So anyena vijnanena, that intelligent, that sentient thing that did something. Anyena vijnanena kritam. Why anyena? Why is it not the same? Because the Bauddha Matam says nothing persists. Everything is momentary, everything is changing. In that case, says Vyasa, if something else did something, then how will something else have the bhoktritva for it? Bhoktritva adhikara. Why will something else experience the fruit of it? So essentially, suppose we did something right now, I threw a ball and therefore I caught it, or I did something bad, I had to reap the fruit of it, etc. This assumes that there is something called I, or this person who subsisted through it. But if there is an opinion or a school that says that nothing subsists, everything is momentary or everything is dharma only, then how can you bring in this aspect of bhoktritva, the fit to experience, one must experience, or one who has the cause to experience? Because there is no, the one that did it was momentary and has gone away. The one that experiences is also momentary and is just emerged and is going to go away. So if there is no subsisting entity and everything is momentary and everything is dharma only and there is no dharmi, then there is the problem of bhoga bhavaha. You can't explain this bhoga, says Vyasa. Now, one more issue Vyasa brings up. One more problem with the dharma matra eva idam, that opinion. Niranvayam dharma matram. Vyasa is countering that opinion, where dharma matra means there is no underlying entity, everything is only the characteristics. Niranvayam means no underlying entity. So Vyasa is countering it. He did that by explaining the bhoga bhava problem. Now he brings another one. He says, Tat smritya bhavascha nanya drushtasya smaranam anyasyastiti. So the abhava of smriti, of remembrance. If the entity that saw a thing was momentary and has gone away, then how will another entity remember it? And then if we have to say that it was the same thing that saw it that as the one who is remembering it, then we are admitting to an entity persisting through that time. That same person saw it and remembered it. But the opinion in question is not accepting that. It doesn't accept a dharmi. And if it doesn't accept a dharmi, then how do you explain the remembering, the smriti and the smaranam? So, vastu pratyabhignanacha sthitaha anvayi dharmi yo dharmanyathatvam abhyupakataha pratyabhignayate. So, he says, pratyabhignya means recognition. So, often, even if a thing has changed, that thing is recognized. So, suppose if you have seen somebody a year ago, and something has changed, he has lost his hair, the hair has turned grey, or now he has a mustache, or he has glasses, wearing glasses, etc. But there is a recognition. So that vastu pratyabhignana, that smaranam is about the subjective persistence. The same person who saw, same person remembered. Similarly, about the other entity also which is being recognized, that is being recognized because it has been the same entity through that period. And therefore, Vyasa is countering the opinion that talks about niranvayatvam and momentariness. No, there is no underlying entity, everything is momentary and everything is only characteristics or dharmas. There is no dharmi. Vyasa is countering it by bringing out the aspect of firstly the bhoga, then how does remembering occur, and thirdly, how are things recognized if there are no persisting things. So these are the counter opinions Vyasa presents. And then he says, Tasmat na idam dharma matram niranvayam iti. So now that parinama has been discussed, dharma has been discussed, dharma dharmi has been discussed, and the dharmi has been established, he says, therefore, that opinion that says that things are dharma matram and niranvayam, that is not true because of the counterpoints that I have made, says Vyasa. On these, there is a lot of vast literature that talks about these particular counterpoints about smaranam, pratyabhignya, then bhoga, etc. And a lot of very abstruse kind of debates that are covered in certain texts of the Shastras. But here, in brief, Vyasa is presenting sort of the Vedic opinion, so to speak, the opinion of the orthodox schools, as opposed to the schools that don't recognize an underlying entity, and therefore they also don't recognize the Atma, they don't recognize the Brahman, etc. And that is the countering that Vyasa has done. He says there is no momentariness. You cannot say that things are only, nothing persists, that everything is only dharma matram, only characteristics, because we strongly say that there is an underlying entity called dharmi that persists through it, and that is seen in recognition in the phala bhoga and also in the smaranam, the remembrance. So that completes the Sutra 3.14 along with its bhashya.
So Vyasa was explaining us the śāntoditāvyapadeśyadharmānupātī. And he came to a very interesting point where what is atha avyapadesha ke? What is this avyapadesya? Avyapadesya means you can perhaps for some inference and chance, you cannot really say that this is the potentiality of something. Because from potent things, so many things can come up. From one potentiality, the thing doesn't have one potentiality, it has several potentialities. Like for example, when you have clay, lump of clay in your hands, it doesn't mean that you have to only turn out a pot. You can turn out so many other things apart from pot. So in the lump of clay, there is potentiality of becoming so many things, and not just the pot. There are so many earthen materials that you can turn out, so many earthen shapes you can turn out, earthen forms you can turn out of lump of clay. So you cannot say that from lump of clay only one output will come out. There will be several outputs. And therefore you cannot decidedly say that this is potentiality of this. There can be so many effects coming out from one potentiality. As I gave the example of, for example, cotton. A lump of cotton. A lump of cotton, so many materials can come up, apart from cloth material. So that's why it is avyapadesya. That means you cannot decisively say that this is going to come out of this. Because there are many probabilities which will come out of that characterized or that substrate. So that is why it is avyapadesya. And then all kinds of effects and several kinds of effects will come up. As a matter, right? Sarvam sarvatmakam iti. And you just now heard the explanation why sarvam sarvatmakam. As you are aware of that postulation of even modern science called ecology, that all matter exists in all matters. All matters exist in all matters. And you just heard about the Panchikaranam, brief mention about that. So there are so many parinamas that can come up from one basic material. And I gave you the example of lump of clay or milk. From milk you can get so many products, milk products. So milk can transform into becoming cream, and then the cream products, milk cream products, the milk can get fermented, and then fermented milk will give you curds, buttermilk, butter, clarified butter, etc. So many dharmas are potentially there in the dharmī. Like even in case of mankind, any person has so many potentials. Therefore, so a person can be becoming so many things. Because there is potentiality to so many things. A person can become a professional man, same person will have potentials to be an artist or to be a thinker. So there are so many potentialities in each individual. So we cannot say what is only the potentiality in a thing or in a matter. And interestingly, he brings the example of Thawaranam Jangameshu Jangamanam Stavareshu. This has been beautifully described by one of the mystic saint poets. We think Sthavara and Jangama are two classes. That means movable, immovable. Living, non-living. So we think these are two different classes. Now we know that living beings are going to die. When the living beings die, they become non-living. When they become non-living, From non-living, again living can come up. Because as you heard, that will become manure. The body of animal, body of living thing, when dead, will become food of plants, food of trees. And then you will get animate kind of fruits and flowers out of that plant. So that's a cycle. Ecology also speaks about this cycle. So these are not absolute classes that something is inert and something is living, something is immovable and something is movable. So the mystic poet whom I referred to just now, he beautifully said that a mango is a bewitching fruit. You generally for mankind, very bewitching fruit. But the mango has come from what? Mango has come from tree, and the tree is nourished and nurtured by manures. And the human waste, which is obnoxious, or animal waste, which is obnoxious, dirty, becomes the manure. And from that manure you get bewitching fruit. And we eat the bewitching fruit. So it can be argued that ultimately we are eating fecal matter. And so bewitchingly eating fecal matter. Because the fruit is turned out by fecal matter, waste matter, dirty matter, etc., which is supplied to the plants as manures. So that's why the mystic poet is trying to impress, don't be getting bewitched by so many things. If you go towards the cause of it, constitution of that matter which is so bewitching, you will encounter some obnoxious things which are refused by you. And that's how the whole nature is working. That's why Vyasa has given that example. The stavaranam jangameshu jangamanam stavareshu. These parinamas are taking place, and you just heard from Srineet how it takes place. So then comes the question, if sarvam sarvatmakam, if everything is of the nature of everything, if all elements are in all elements, why is this cosmos? It should be chaos. Anything should come out of anything. So Vyasa gives clarification here. That's not the case. So you heard about that desha kala akara nimitta sambandhat na khalu samana kalam atmanam abhivyakti iti. So there are so many factors which have to come together for manifestations, and therefore there is system, and this is cosmos and not chaos. So all matters exist in all matters, yet, or there are so many potentialities in one potential thing, yet deshakal, nimitta, etc. factors are contributing as to why someone who has potentialities to be a musician has become a professional man. So many factors have come, and therefore the person has become a professional person. Deshakal, nimitta, the incidental causes, etc., instrumental causes, etc., coefficient causes, etc., they all have to come together for material cause to be impacted. And therefore, although a person is having potentials to be a musician, yet becomes a professional man. Although somebody has potentials to become a professional man, has become an artist. It is because of coincidental factors and so many factors. So there are so many factors which are converging for potentiality to become actuality. And therefore, although sarvam sarvatmakam, if everything is of the nature of everything, and that is true, yet there are other factors which decide what will come out of this. So therefore, there is that niyamabaddhata in the nature. Nature is not disorderly. Nature has order. Nature is cosmos, and nature is not chaos. Anyway, the dharmi has been mentioned, something is constant. Now, this something is constant is not tolerated by heterodox philosophers. And you heard about that argument which came up, that something must be constant. Otherwise, karma phala vyavastha will not be there. As the heterodox philosophers believe that there is nothing static, nothing steady, nothing eternal, or nothing long-lasting. As a matter of fact, everything is momentary. Kshanikavadins, so these are heterodox philosophers, they have this position that everything is momentary. If everything is momentary, I do something and I perish next moment, but the fruit is had. That means it is avyavastha of the fruit. That means someone has done and someone else is enduring the fruit of it. This is not justifiable. So therefore, the orthodox philosophers, Sankhyas, Vedantis, etc., they postulate something whereby the karma phala vyavastha is there. If the doer is perishing next moment, the effects cannot be had by the same doer, the karta. Whereas in karma phala vyavastha, we see that one who does endures the fruit of it, faces the fruition of it. This is because something is constant. Like a Chaitra, the Chaitra was infant earlier, then was a child, then became a teenager, then became adult, young, and then adult, etc. So it is one person who goes through the stages of life. So we all have gone through stages of life, and there is no position to say that I have been momentary, and every time I have been different in all my stages of life. I was young, I was a child, I was a teenager, I will be an adult, I will be an old person. That means something is static. And this is what we see in this world and the order of the world. The karma phala vyavastha will not be there. Karma karta and karma bhokta would be different, which is not justifiable, and that doesn't happen that way. So also about memory and pratyabhignya, recognition. So we say, what I saw yesterday, I am touching today. That means I am constant. I was there yesterday and I saw that yesterday, and the same eye is now touching it. So the memory and pratyabhignya need something as a substrate. Therefore, you say, now I remember after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Now I still recognize even after 30 years. So maybe the person you are seeing today is the person last you saw was 30 years back. But you don't necessarily fail to recognize. You say, yes, I had seen, and you are quite childlike, you are very small that time, and now you are quite grown up. How does it happen? That means something is static in that person and something is static in you. Therefore, you recognize today after 30 years. Gap of 30 years, you are recognizing today. So the memory similarly comes. Memory comes to one locus, which is there while it was experienced, and now it is being recalled. So the dharmi has to be accepted, while the heterodox philosophers, because of their dogma, because the dogma that everything is momentary, nothing subsists, nothing stays on, nothing sticks on, that is refuted by this sutra, by mentioning something as dharmi, something as characterized. And therefore those argumentations came in Vyasa's commentary to refute. the position taken by some of the heterodox philosophers called Bauddha. Bauddha matam. Bauddha means not to necessarily to attribute to a person who we know was born about 400 BC, around 400 BC. It is not referring to one person, because that Buddha himself gave 4 schools, and they themselves had contradictions within themselves, as you heard just now. So Bauddha matam means heterodox systems, those who do not accept Atma, those who do not accept self. So those are philosophies which reject self, that's all. And they are called Bauddhas. They are heterodox philosophers, anatmavadi. So Vyasa is trying to consider them as well here and refute them, their point of view of Kshanikavada, momentarism. And that's why in the wake of discussion of this sutra, this polemic exchange came about. Anyway, the dharmī is to be accepted. Something static, something substrate has to be accepted. And that's why Patanjali has postulated dharmī and dharma. Dharmī has dharma parinama, dharma has lakshana parinama, lakshana have the avastha parinamas, but something is constant. Like earth is constant, it might be any earthen manifestation or any phase of it. The pot can become chips or pot can become once again powder. Somebody might crush it. Yet the earthness will not go. There is something static there. So that metaphysical aspect was being discussed in this sutra. And wonderful definition of dharmī and the relevant matters came to discussion, which is definitely adding to our quotient to study metaphysics. Okay.
So let's recite the slokas on Guruji and stop for today. Vajñānikam pravaktritva asaneshu kalavidam yogābhyāse ca tattvajñam vandeham sundaram gurum yogavruksho hi lokesmin yat preranena varditah yogācārya guro tubhyam sundaraya namo namaha. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.